Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the best platform in the United States. In fact, the number one platform in the United States with an audience of over 250 million people every week on the iHeartRadio platform. I also want to thank all of our great listeners out in Latin America, so thank you so much for that. And bienvenidos. I guarantee you, Big C, I'm going to learn more than bienvenidos pretty soon, Big C. But I also want to thank the great people across the pond in London, England. And, of course, the great people in Canada. Love Canada. I think they took it out on the U.S. hockey team since I wasn't able to cite their national anthem, Big C. So they beat the good old boys from the USA pretty bad, Big C. So I apologize for that, America. And also I want to thank the good old boys in the United States of America. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. Even though we don't always act that way, Big C, what are you good old boys doing down south, Big C?
We're trying to buffer ourselves from the heat, Charlton. Today is actually the last day of summer, so we're on fall so we can get our football programs in the full stride down here. You know, we know we're warming up in those latter summer months, but now that the fall is here, that's when these big can really move a football.
Yeah, you still thinking about football, Big C? The football is already 2 weeks into the season, but I know for you good old boys, it's been like it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is that like a national pastime for you guys in the South playing football, Big C?
Charlton, is there anything better? I know you West Coast boys like to talk about basketball and a little bit of football and everything. But in the South, we originated football down here, Charlton. We teach people how to play it. Everybody wants to come down here and challenge, but everybody walks away with their tail between their legs.
Well, I understand that happened to me. One time I played a football game against some good old boys down south. I thought we were just going to play touch football, Big C, so I'm not bracing for the hit. Man, this girl, it was a girl, Big C. She took me out, man. I felt pretty bad and embarrassed, but she actually went on to play for the University of Alabama, so I didn't feel too bad, Big C. And also, maybe she was on the Trojans team also, Big C. And speaking of excellent performance, this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go down and test drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And again, you know, Big C, people keep asking me, why would a guy like Big C, who has all this social etiquette, have mud in his Escalade? Because a lot of people in California, they watch the Kardashians. I think they take their shoes off before they get inside of their ride. So can you explain why it doesn't matter if you have mud in the Escalade, Big C, in the South?
I think back several years ago when you got...
Go ahead, Big C.
Mud wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't see everybody being clean that was using their cars.
Yeah.
You know, cars like the family and stuff. You know, you
Yeah.
get the dog in, you get your buddy Boots in, everybody just gets in and goes for a ride.
Well, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I had the Jerry curl. I know you guys in the South, you guys still wear the Jerry curl, Big C, but I'll never forget.
It's called perspiration, Charlton. We have a lot of humidity down here, and it just makes the hair go down and lay.
Well, I remember one time I went to my grandmama's house. I was so proud of my Jerry curl, Big C, it dripped all over my clothes and made me look good, right? I'll never forget sitting on grandma's sofa, and she told me I had to put plastic down first because we messed up all of her clothing. So anyway, you good old boys in the South, I know you know about that. But Big C, just into some sports, some things that are happening that aren't as funny, quite the opposite of being funny. You know, we talk about this Colin Kaepernick and all the social issues, and we have a great country. I mean, America's great, even though we don't always see eye to eye, Big C. But I was just hearing that he's actually getting some death threats for just trying to, it wasn't even a violent protest, but there's not a lot of pushback on the people making the death threats other than Colin Kaepernick. I mean, this is a crazy country. It's a great country, but that's a little bit over the top, Big C. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Charlton, you think about it, he did a silent, peaceful protest. Colin Kaepernick did not call anybody to arms, Charlton.
No.
He knelt in a peaceful way, quietly, by himself. He was not trying to draw attention to himself. This has been the media's reaction.
Yeah.
But, you know, for a player in the NFL to receive death threats. Now, the NFL has its own policing body. Matter of fact, the commissioner hired the former police chief of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
to be the head of policing for the NFL.
Yeah.
Now, to have Colin Kaepernick living this way, Charlton, with death threats. Now, you know, they said he's anti-patriotic, okay, Charlton?
Yeah.
What is patriotism? Is patriotism being an American putting out death threats on another American?
No, not at all.
Stupid people want to say.
Not at all.
Patriotism, Charlton.
No.
Threatening, making terrorist threats on an American. This is asinine and idiotic. This is what the American public has gone to. This is a la Donald Trump's theory.
Yeah.
Go ahead on and injure another American. Why, Charlton? This is, we talked about the national anthem. You brought that up a couple of weeks ago, Charlton.
Yeah.
About what's been omitted from the national anthem.
Yeah.
The original national anthem, Charlton, is in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C., written by Francis Scott Key.
Yeah.
You can also pull it up on the internet, Charlton, where it talks about putting slaves in graves. Those are African Americans that they're talking about eliminating their lives, Charlton. That's what our national anthem stated.
Yeah.
And so if you understand the full body of what Colin Kaepernick is standing for, it's what Malcolm X stood for.
Yeah.
It's what Martin Luther King stood for. It's what Muhammad Ali stood for, Charlton. There is not equality in America, and especially when it comes to justice.
Yeah. Well, Big C, I'm going to ask you this question, too. And I know sometimes, and people have to understand, it's not always about white on black or black on white. Sometimes it's within our own groups of people. And one of the greatest promoters in the history of the world, at least when it comes to boxing, and I've always admired him. Now, I'm not one to jump on someone for saying something stupid, because I say stupid things all the time, Big C. At least that's what my friends tell me. But I got to say this. Don King, people want to stump for votes, and they always want to come up and tell you how much they love you and how wonderful you are, and especially when they want your vote, and then once you vote for them, you don't see them for another 4 years. Well, Donald Trump is going around the black churches probably for the first time in his life, Big C, and he's trying to find a black spokesperson to speak for him, right? Now, whether you're black or white, everybody goes to segregated churches for the most part. That's nothing new. But here's Donald Trump in a black church, quote-unquote black church, and he has, of all people, the great Don King, one of the best boxing promoters in the history of the world. Promoted Mike Tyson, dealt with Muhammad Ali, and Larry Holmes, and Buster Douglas, a lot of fighters over the years. So he's having Don King introduce him to the black community, Big C. And of all the great people that he could have used, Don King's using the N-word as if he's in a parlor or a barbershop. Now, some of these white guys, along with Donald Trump, they felt uncomfortable, but they were laughing and giggling anyway. I think Don King is he's not a spokesperson for the African American community, and I know he's well off, and he's made a lot of great things over the years happen for his own bank account, Big C. But what a dumb statement to take a man who's never come around the black church into the heart of the black church to try to stump for black votes, and he's dropping the N-word as if he's a rapper, Big C. I just thought that was disgusting. And Donald Trump and all of his good old boys, they're laughing, Big C. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Donald King, Charlton, also spent 7 years in penitentiary for an alleged homicide.
Yeah.
So him representing the African American community, he has not been liked since the pillaging of Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Charlton.
Yeah.
So the African American community has not listened to him or wanted to be a part of him since those days, since he destroyed a true American icon.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump and his stance against America. And, he's built this on Mexican Americans, Charlton.
Yeah.
But African Americans fall in that same suit.
Yeah.
And, when we look at the injustice that is still occurring, we talked about the rebel flag still being flown in the South.
Yeah.
Also, we had another African American killed last week in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
A travesty. Witnessed on the news, man walking away from the police with his hands in the air.
Yeah.
Shot in the back, lost his life. Just today, Charlton, in South Carolina, another African-American man was killed, allegedly sitting in his car, waiting on his children to arrive.
Are you saying today?
Today, Charlton, in South Carolina, by another police officer. This is something that, if America is saying that Colin Kaepernick is wrong, what is right? Is it okay? And I understand law enforcement has a terrible job, a tough job every day. And no one wants anybody to lose their life. But when you have unarmed men and women losing their lives, Charlton, and 80% of them are African Americans, there's no equality, Charlton, in law protection.
Yeah.
The law is to protect everybody equally. And when you're not getting that, you're getting this huge disparity of African Americans, Charlton, treated unjustly through law enforcement. And it's noted in the news. It's not hearsay.
Yeah.
It's what people can turn on the news and see every day. And then they want to say that Colin Kaepernick is wrong. because he is trying to make a social stance. And for America to sit up and deny what is happening to African Americans every day, if it's just one, it's one too many, Charlton.
Yeah, I mean,
this has been dozens.
Yeah. And I think it's something else, too, when you think about how, Trent Dilfer told Colin Kaepernick, sit down and sit up. Dabo Swinney said, if you don't like the country, leave the country. This is some of the things we're talking about.
University of Clemson at?
Yeah.
University of Clemson is in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Is Dabo Swinney going to bring his dumb butt out today
No.
and tell the police and the white community and the black community just shut up?
No.
Now, Dabo Swinney now has a platform because this happened in his home state of South Carolina today, where this gentleman lost his life. A father of four, Charlton.
Big C, talk for about a whole minute on why that's so important, because you're in the South and people think it doesn't exist anymore. Go ahead for about a minute.
It exists everywhere, Charlton, but especially here in the South. And when Dabo Swinney came out and made that asinine statement last week that athletes down and shut up, why not say that today? Why not come out today and say these injustices against African Americans were totally wrong, Charlton? Dabo Swinney now has the perfect platform. Where's Trent Dilfer? Why didn't he speak on the incident, Charlton, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where a man was standing peacefully with his hands in the air and gunned down by two police officers, Charlton? So when we need these individuals who have been blasting Colin Kaepernick and been anti-African American, Charlton,
yeah,
with this talking about a piece of paper that was written hundreds of years ago,
yeah,
and it was anti-African American at that time, Charlton, and when an African American protest, because he has the right as an American citizen. I want America to sit back and look.
Yeah. How
many white Americans have had protests throughout the years, and they never told them to sit down and shut up?
And you know what, Big C, this is interesting because we do this show live remote, so we're out live. We're not in the studio. I'm out and about. I like to go around college campuses and watch college teams get ready for football. Just in the parking lot from where I'm doing the show, there was a lady walking by in the parking lot. She happened to be a Caucasian woman. She got a shirt that says Black Lives Matter. Now, to me, that touches my heart because I grew up around diversity, and most people in California, we don't have some of that same issue. And I know maybe I'm being naive, Big C, but I think as more people interact, that's going to solve the problem. And this is a young Caucasian woman that says Black Lives Matter. And I think as the commissioners of baseball and also the NBA and then hockey and, of course, the NFL, they formed a group that we talked about yesterday to help find out what's the root of poverty. How can we help with more interaction? I'm also talking to attorney, one of the best sports agents in the country, Lee Steinberg. I have a friend of his that I'm meeting over in the Bay Area, and we were talking about how can we do programs that don't just talk about sports. Big C, it comes from what you talked about, and Harry Edwards followed up. We have to create opportunities for people. But it's when older white men, because they're the ones in power, like Lyndon Baines Johnson, when they start saying what's important to them, I think our whole country benefits. So not only do I applaud the young people, I have as many young Caucasian people that are saying, yes, we want to try to end this poverty, not just among young black kids, but white kids too, Big C. That's important.
Look at this, Charlton.
Yeah.
How long have we had dialogue? You and I have had dialogue for months on this show, okay? It's been national dialogue for a long time. If you remember a little more than a month ago, ESPN did a quorum, okay?
Yeah.
Hosted by
Jamil Hill? Yeah.
But who was on that quorum? All black athletes, Charlton.
Right.
Okay, now why can't we have a quorum hosted on national TV? We got these presidential debates coming up. I believe it's Monday night.
Yeah.
With Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Nobody will press the race issue during this debate. Lester Holt, an African American, will be hosting.
Yeah.
But he will not press the race issue. Charlton, what we need is a national quorum put on all major networks at the same time, simulcast, just like the debates and the convention.
Yeah, I agree.
It needs to be on all national, but it needs to be hosted by someone like a Harry Edwards, Charlton.
Yeah, okay? I think so. I think you're right.
And you know who the parties on the stage should be?
Who's that?
We should have white police officers.
Yeah.
We should have white senators. We should have white congressmen. We should have white executives. Don't put African-American athletes on this board, Charlton.
Yeah.
Talking about what can you do to solve the problem. Put the people in America who are in charge. Our politicians.
Yeah.
Our corporate leaders. Let them speak about the problems. Let them be grilled by someone of expertise like a Harry Edwards,
yeah,
who is very well versed in race relations, Charlton, and economic depression.
Well, see,
he knows this.
Big
Put
C,
these people on the spot.
Yeah.
All the conversations we can have until it comes to that dialogue with the elite part of white America,
yeah,
nothing will ever be done, Charlton.
And speaking of things being done, this segment is sponsored by your California Lottery. What can a buck do for you? Big C, I'm just going to keep praying. It's not $100 million, but it is. I think it's about $20 million tonight with the Powerball. So we'll take it, Big C. And maybe with that, you can get chicken scratch. Maybe you can take the winnings and have that Escalade waxed out or vacuumed out, Big C. I was thinking about you when it came to that, Big C. So go out and invest in the lottery. What can a buck do for you? Is that something you would do, Big C? At least take the card to get it vacuumed, Big C?
We can go through those drive-through car washes, Charlton, where you drop $5 in and just drive through and bust it off on the outside. That's all we need.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But I love what we're talking about because it's important as we all love our society, and I want to think that this is important too. When you don't have to be a woman to realize that violence against women happen in our society. I think men should speak up about violence against women and don't just leave it up to women who are assaulted. I mean, there was a doctor accused of sexually abusing 2 gymnasts. That was filed Tuesday in the state of Michigan, and that was at Michigan State University. Now, police said that they received additional allegations of abuse since last week. This happened, they were members of the 2000 U.S. Women's Olympic team. Now, this is what I want to say as a gymnastics team. If you are a man, don't just leave it up to women to talk about assault, sexual assault. We have to protect women. I'm not trying to see that we're all pejoratively going to protect women. There are a lot of women who can protect themselves. But if we as men have women in our lives that we respect and care about, then we should not leave the onus upon them to only speak for themselves any more than a person who's Caucasian to leave the onus up to African Americans to speak for themselves. So when a guy like Trent Dilfer says, sit down and shut up, go tell that to Harry Edwards to go sit down and shut up. Or go find Mike Tyson and tell him to sit down and shut up, Big C.
Why didn't he go tell the kicker for the New York Giants, Brown?
Yeah.
Who had an alleged 20 incidents of domestic violence against his wife.
And he missed one game.
Why didn't Trent Dilfer speak up against him?
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick had no issues of violence against anybody.
Yeah.
But we got a kicker in the National Football League. He was only suspended one game.
One game
for beating up his wife.
Over 20 times.
With police reports on it, Charlton.
Yeah.
So when you look at that and you look at the disparity, we had Ray Rice with one incident against his wife.
Lost his career.
Lost his NFL career.
Yeah.
He had Adrian Peterson with the discipline of a child.
Yeah.
Lost an entire season. Greg Hardy lost the season. But the kicker had 20 incidents in police reports of beating the crap out of his wife. He gets a 1-game suspension from the league or the team, one of them. But we're talking about equality in the legal system and in the justice system, Charlton, that an Anglo man can beat his wife 20 times, have a police call, and nothing really happens to him because 1 game for a kicker is nothing.
And that's incredible.
We're not talking about a team, but this is an athletic disparity also, Charlton. It's not even equal in professional sports on how society treats. And for years, athletes have said, hey, just give me my paycheck, let me make a nice living, and I'll go away. I won't say anything.
Yeah.
But now athletes have come out with a social conscience. They all thought about it. But until Colin Kaepernick stood up, because we have these protests, and they're not protests.
Yeah.
Everybody's using the wrong word. They are not protesting. They are voicing their opinion and their thought.
Yeah.
So let's not misname this as a protest. It is an action. It is a social action that they're doing, and it's occurring on the high school level, it's occurring on the college level, and it's occurring on the professional level. The problem is, Charlton, that it's being led by African Americans.
Yeah.
And that makes America uncomfortable. That you have African Americans, just like when they abolished slavery.
Yeah.
And hey, we're going to speak for ourselves. Just like during Jim Crow in the South, where you had separate but equal, and it was not equal.
Yeah.
That's what society technically is. It's separate and it's unequal. Because if there was equality in America, Charlton, we wouldn't have this huge disparity in injustice. You see it in sports, you see it in life. It's equal, Charlton.
Well, see, and that's so important, Big C. One more allegation I'll bring up before we get to another sponsor. And it's funny because when you start opening your eyes and we're not just a sycophants to the game and we're not just a sycophants to seeing a star, I'll never forget when I was a young boy and I actually met George Foreman It was right when he was about to fight Muhammad Ali. He was training at a gym over in Hayward, California, and he was getting ready to go fight Muhammad Ali. He was the heavyweight champion in the world at that time, and I thought how big and powerful this man looked, and I was enamored with a big heavyweight champion fighter. Well, now that I'm a grown man, Big C, I'm not enamored, but I do see how some adults don't grow out of that, Big C. Now, think about this when we talk about race and money, because it's all there. And we talk about what's the thing about Black Lives Matter and why do people want to take a stance against, blacks being discriminated against. Well, if you step outside of your own comfort zone, you might find out why. Here's one more allegation. NASCAR. That's big down in the South where you are, Big C. NASCAR is being sued on allegations that it blocked efforts to racially diversify the U.S. motorsports, according to multiple media reports. Not just Charlton and Big C, but this is filed in the the Los Angeles Times had this article. And the lawsuit was filed Friday by Diversity Motorsports. The CEO, Terrence Cox, he's charging the racing organization with this is what Trent Dilfer doesn't understand happens in America, Big C. He's charging them with intentionally interfering with the efforts of Cox and Diversity Motorsports to integrate the U.S. motorsports industry. Now, you think about, that's a racing industry where they make tens of millions of dollars in sponsorship. Imagine if a rich CEO is being discriminated against Trent Dilfer and the coach down at Clemson, Sweeney? Dabu Sweeney, I think. Damfu Sweeney. Okay, Damfu Sweeney. Imagine if a rich black CEO that's a multi-millionaire is facing corporate discrimination. That's why it's important for white men, unless they go along with it, maybe they acquiesce to it. But if you don't believe discrimination is fair or sexism is fair, you got to call people out. It's also at the heart, not just the sports industry, but this is a great pulpit to talk to people. If law enforcement in corporate America can be chastised from within when they commit crimes, that's how we can solve this problem. When men hold other men accountable for sexual assault, don't just leave it up to the woman who was accused or who was assaulted. When men start holding their other men that we know accountable, that's how we can put an end to this garbage, whether it's racism or sexism. I think that's so important, Big C, and I just want to say this segment is sponsored by United Labor, guaranteed $100,000 life insurance with no medical checkups, no medical questions. It's guaranteed issue. We also are endorsed by the American Heart Association and the American Cancer Society. We also work with all of the unions under the AFL-CIO. We're looking to hire over 1,000 brokers and in putting them to work with Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. Reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook, and also contact Charlton and Big C at Big C Sports at Twitter. Okay, now think about this, Big C. If we think about how many men have access to a microphone, but we become sycophants and we don't want to talk about how to help keep people safe, then why even have a microphone? That's why I'm proud that you brought up this issue. If you have a microphone in front of your face, Charlton, don't just be like the average guy that just wants to tell people scores. I think we're doing a good thing to help open the eyes, not only for people of color, but for women too, Big C. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Charlton, when you talk about opening eyes, you're supposed to about NASCAR.
Yeah.
NASCAR has shunned African-American drivers for decades. We've had some African-American involvement, but when you look at the track, it's literally white on race day.
Yeah.
When you look at good old boys, they do all the negative things in life that everybody else does, Charlton. You talked about the charges being charged. Think about Kurt Busch, NASCAR driver.
Yeah.
His ex-fiance is facing several federal charges for embezzlement from a charitable organization that he had set up.
Really?
She stole some $600,000 over a 6-year span, Charlton. $600,000 that were supposed to go to children and aid organizations to help people. But she was more interested in self-preservation.
So are you saying that Trent Dilfer told her to sit down and shut up, and Dabu Sweeney also a Big C? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, if Trent Dilfer told the truth, Charlton, about what was occurring in American society, and if he was being a patriot, he would applaud Colin Kaepernick for having patriotism.
Freedom of speech.
He's a racist bigot, Charlton.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this. Trent Dilfer, Dabu Sweeney are both racist bigots who made billions of dollars off the backs of African Americans, making them an elite player and coach.
Yeah, and okay? I think that's an accusation that if they're not, then let them hold a forum and come out and say how they were wrong, or at least apologize to all people who believe in freedom of speech, because here's a guy getting death threats over their ignorant statements, and they don't come out and apologize for that. But when you have that that knee-jerk reaction by this good old boy mentality that's existed for 400 years in this country. We got to call it out. If not, it's like a cancer. It's going to keep growing. And I know a lot of guys don't have the stones to stand up and say anything because they just want to be passive. A lot of men are passive anyway, Big C. They don't know what to do without leadership. But I think with the Charlton and Big C Sports, we do have some leadership. There are times we say things that might be a mistake or may not be accurate. We can apologize for it and move on. Yeah, you did that twice, Big C. Yeah, because you spilled some moonshine in the back of my car one time as if I was a good old boy from the South. I didn't appreciate it, Big C. It still got that smell of moonshine in there, Big C. But I do. Yeah, of course.
When he made the statement that players need to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
What if all of his African American players, Charlton, sit down this weekend?
Yeah.
And shut up.
Yeah.
Didn't say a word. Didn't take a snap.
Yeah.
What would happen to the University of Clemson? They would get drubbed up and down the field, Charlton.
Oh, yeah.
If all his African American players sit down, shut up, not participate.
Imagine.
What would he look like as a coach, Charlton?
Well,
he would look like that damn fool.
Yeah, he would. But imagine when you think about that, black and white, young and old, doesn't matter. Think about what Dr. King went through when we did not even have civil rights. You have people who have been free to speak for over 50 years now. Freedom of expression has applied since the Civil Rights Act was passed. And you still have that mentality. And some guys are so brazen because they're so comfortable in their own circles where they talk like this all the time. They can come out on national TV and radio and tell people to shut up for exercising the First Amendment. And they do it with impunity. There's no recourse against them until you have a program like ours that will call them out. And maybe they'll come out by ESPN. But maybe ESPN condones that type of behavior. That's why they haven't admonished them or set them down, Big C. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you think about his statement versus the statement of Chris Carter, the former wide receiver from the Minnesota Vikings, Philadelphia Eagles, and Ohio State.
Yeah.
When he made a statement during a rookie consortium a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
He needed a fall guy.
Yeah.
And so ESPN suspended him for a couple of weeks for making this statement. But he made a true statement of how society works.
Yeah.
This was the world that Chris Carter grew up in. This is the world that Chris Carter knew because this was part of the African American society.
Yeah.
Trent Dilfer never saw that side of the world. But Trent Dilfer can come out and make racial statements because it was racial and inflammatory what he said about Colin Kaepernick. He knows nothing about Colin Kaepernick's life. He knows nothing about his background. Trent Dilfer wasn't adopted. He was raised in a privileged white community.
Yeah.
He wasn't adopted and being a biracial child.
I understand.
He didn't know what Colin Kaepernick went through.
Yeah.
You have to walk in somebody's shoes first, Charlton, understand what they go through in life to say, hey, I have an understanding. This is the reason why, Charlton, our politicians, our white lawmakers, our white police chiefs, they don't sit on a quorum talking about what's wrong.
Yeah.
They will not do that. They don't want to jeopardize them not being racially sensitive, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's racial insensitivity in America, whether it's in sports. I mean, when I grew up playing sports, and I can go back to when I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
And I came out and for the football team. And I get down in a position that said, no, these belong to these guys.
Yeah.
And they were, referring to the white players that were already there. I'm like, no, if I got to practice, I'm going to play.
Yeah.
I even told the coach, if I have to practice, then I deserve equal time.
Yeah.
So what I would do was line up across from this guy, Charlton, that was going out for the same position that I was.
Yeah.
And go against him every day and punish him. Punish him, not because he was a football player, but because he was supposed to be privileged.
Yeah.
He was supposed to automatically give him something. And I had the rest of my white teammates challenging me why I got to be so hard on him. I said, if he's that good, then he kicks my butt.
Yeah, and that's part of something that everybody's had to prove themselves with on the athletic field, and also in corporate America, as we see the 4 commissioners came out, and these are wealthy white men. They understand what happens in society. I'm also looking at a segment where I have a couple of, I think, intelligent, enlightened businesswomen. One is Saeed Bearfield. She's part of a push to help create positivity for young entrepreneurs. I met a lady by the name of Destiny Robbins today. She's excellent. She's a singer, musician, and also an author. There's Myra DeLeon. She's also an insurance broker. She's about trying to create positive change for the youth. And also Cindy, I work with Cindy. We work with the uniform company to create uniforms for anyone in the country, Big C. So I think it's important that we not just worry about what happens in life, but we actually create a positive change. And I think with the Charlton and Big C Sports, we want to create that positive change, Big C. And just a little bit about the NFL and also some college football. I'm looking at some coaches that might be on the hot seat, Big C. You look at Les Miles. They were actually picked preseason-wise to win the SEC conference, and they've kind of struggled out of the gate. Big C. You also have the Clay Helton at USC. They were picked the challenge for the Pac-12 South in the Pac-12 conference, Big C. And then you also have Gus Malzahn at Auburn. They went for the national championship just a few seasons ago. All of these coaches are on the hot seat, but they've had some losing seasons, but they're still employed. Big C, your thoughts on that?
You know, it's ironic when you look at that, Charles. Gus Malzahn can't get off the snide right now down at Auburn.
Yeah.
You know, it goes to prove what you can do when you have a great quarterback. He had Cam Newton down there.
Yeah.
They had Nick Marshall down there. And in those two quarterbacks, Charles, they competed for 2 national championships. He doesn't have those quarterbacks any longer, Charles.
Yeah.
And when you look at Les Miles, maybe that $14 million buyout last year was a bad idea.
No, I'll take it. I'll take $14 million. Yeah.
But, you know, you look at USC, one of the most desirable universities in the country, a heritage university, Charlton.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've had a couple bad hires at head coach. When you brought in Sarkisian, he had never done anything up in Washington.
Yeah, that's true.
You put in Helton as the head coach to replace him, and he was offensive coordinator. That's why Sarkisian went to Alabama and gave up the playbook. But you bring in Lynn Swann as athletic director.
Yeah.
Why did you bring in Lynn Swann? What experience does he have as an athletic director? Just like when you brought in Pat Hayden, you brought guys from a broadcast booth and made them the athletic directors, back-to-back former players. You can't live on the past of how productive USC was when they were there.
Yeah.
They should have put together a national search committee, got an athletic director who's been successful, even if it came from a smaller university.
Yeah.
But they should have also went out and got a high-profile coach, Charlton. USC is a high-profile program.
Yeah.
And college football is better when you have USC with a strong program on the West Coast versus the other teams that you have, Charlton.
Well, you know, I met Lynn Swann when I used to do some work with ABC Sports back in the day, and he was actually a field reporter. I think they had the late Frank Gifford. He was in the press box. And, of course, he was always great. Frank Gifford, another player that went to USC. But I think you're right. Whether you're on a coaching search, you look at what Texas did. They got Charlie Strong, who had gone to Louisville, but he had success at Louisville before they brought him under the scene, Big C. You also have coaches that have transferred all around the country that were successful. Look at Urban Meyer, who was successful at Utah and then Florida and then Ohio State, Big C. So, Jim, you look at also your buddy for the University of Michigan, Big C, Harbaugh. He was successful at San Diego, Stanford, the 49ers, and now at Michigan, Big C. I think USC is missing that, where they're trying to just look within and give their good old friends that cronyism, whether you're black or white. I think that's been their downfall. They have to put on a national search. What if they had been in the position to get a guy like Harbaugh or get a guy like Charlie Strong and start building from within, because they've already come from winning programs? That's what they need at Auburn. That's what they need at USC. And then, you know, LSU, they have the heartbeat of talent down, but Les Miles has job security, Big C.
Well, Les Miles came from Oklahoma State prior to going to LSU, and he had some success early in his career at LSU. But you got to look at this. What was the University of Alabama prior to Nick Saban showing up?
Yeah, not that good.
Give a weird coaching job, okay?
Yeah.
Prior to Nick Saban, they were a doorman program. They were losing 5-6 games a year.
Yeah.
And they were trying to lynch the head coaches. So what you've gotten with Nick Saban coming in, Nick saying, you're going to hire me, and the rest of you are going to turn your back to what I do.
Yeah.
I'm in total charge. I don't want anybody knocking on my door asking me any questions. This is my house.
It's always.
That's what Nick Saban has done. And so when you look at college football programs throughout history, Charlton,
yeah,
there have been dominant coaches. Woody Hayes was a dominant coach.
Yeah.
Barry Switz at Oklahoma was a dominant coach.
Oh, he was good.
John
Yeah.
Robinson at USC was a dominant coach. People did not question him, Charlton.
Yeah.
They let them run their programs. They were successful.
Lou Holtz at Notre Dame.
National champions.
Yeah.
Tom Osborne.
Yeah.
At Nebraska. You know, you can look up and down the list. Nick Holtz. Look at Jimmy Johnson when he was at Miami.
Yeah.
You know, these programs are run by the coaches.
Yeah.
Not by the boosters, not by the athletic director, not by the university president. Let a coach be a coach. You can have a solid program. That's what sports is. But we want to make it political.
Yeah.
We want all this political atmosphere around that we have power here. We can control this situation. Players play ball, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, volleyball, track and field. Athletes compete. You need someone there, Charlton, who understands these athletes.
Yes.
You got to allow budget to put together a staff that can get the best out of these athletes. That's what Alabama's done, Charlton.
Yeah.
When you look at the success Alabama's had, they got the highest paid coaching staff in the nation, assistant coaches.
Yeah.
But what have they got? 4 national championships since Saban's been there?
Oh, yeah.
4?
Yeah.
So, you know, he's putting down the blueprint. The rest of these stupid people need to just pay attention. Get out of the way and let somebody go.
Well, speaking of the Blueprint, Big C, this last section is sponsored by One Life America Life Insurance. I'm an insurance broker with One Life America. We are the leaders when it comes to final expense. I'm also looking to hire over 1,000 licensed insurance brokers to help put people back to work. Also by BeneathHisWingsFoundation.org and also CYNN Entertainment when it comes to promotions. Cynthia Evans, she's the best in Northern California. Just want to touch a little bit on the NFL, Big C, as we get ready to close out today's program on this beautiful September the 21st, 2016. If you look at the Minnesota Vikings and the Cleveland Browns, we'll focus on those two teams. The Browns, it looks like they're on their third quarterback in 3 weeks, Big C, but also their fifth quarterback in their last 5 games. What's going on with the Cleveland can't keep quarterbacks healthy, Big C?
Well, you know, when you think about it, they've had 25 different starting quarterbacks, Charlton, since they came back into the league in 1999.
Yeah.
But, you know, to have 5 different starting quarterbacks in 5 consecutive games, and in this state going back to the last 2 games of last season, there's an instability, and people wonder what's wrong with that program.
Yeah.
And that's that. You know, you look around the NFL and you see starting quarterbacks week in, week out in the same position. But, you know, they have not gotten that in Cleveland, so that leads to that instability, the inconsistency on the offense, the timing with the receivers, the handing off the ball to the running back. The simplicity of the game, Charlton.
Go ahead, Big C, go ahead. You talked about the simplicity of the game, Big C, but what's going to be the cost to fix all the problems that they're having with that, Big C? Your thoughts on that? Looks like we're having some technical difficulty with Big C, but I just want to tell you that no matter what, when you think about all the teams that play in the world of college football or even in the NFL, you're always going to have people that got to get it right. They got to find a way to fix their problems, Big C. And if you don't think about changing coaching sometimes, you're going to end up having the same old people. And when you do that, things don't really change. We're in a world where a lot of people, they hire their friends, and that's part of what happens, Big C, when you want to hire your friend instead of giving the new person on the block the chance to make a difference on a team. So if you're going to keep having it that way, you're really not going to have much of a difference when it comes to who's going to coach a program. If you're in the NFL, there's a lot of coaches, they have the tenure, Big C, because coaches in the NFL, they know each other. It's a good old boy network. Would you agree with that, Big C? Looks like we lost Big C. He's out there in the East Coast, but I know you guys are having some weather issues back there, Big C. But I do want to say, as we come to a close on today's program, I'm always looking at what we can do to make society better. This is a great country. I love talking about sports. I love talking about the opportunity. We are the land of the free. We are the home of the brave. If we can find a way to make people better, and you make people better by giving them an opportunity, Big C, I think that's the great thing about our country. If you can make people have an opportunity, you create that opportunity for them. That's what Charlton and Big C Sports wants to do. If we can always focus on how to make things better for everybody, Big C, I think that's what makes our country better. I don't know if we have you back on the line now, Big C. Are you still there? Looks like we lost Big C, but we'll give him a call tomorrow. But I do want to tell everybody for following Charlton and Big C Sports, life is not easy, especially when you're a leader. You're always going to have people criticize you. It's easy to criticize people, especially when they're in leadership. I don't care who you are. If you're trying to be a leader, you can always find a way to help other people. But you got to take chances. You got to be willing to stand up. You got to be willing to tell people if they're right or wrong. We're not always right. We're definitely not always wrong. If I can do one thing, I want to make sure that we increase the dialogue with all people, making sure that all Americans are treated the same. No matter who you are, if you are an American, you have the right to question authority. You could even question Charlton and Big C Sports. I think we have Big C back on the line right now. But Big C, just in closing out, if I can hear you, I want to just ask you your thought on how to keep going forward and make sure that everybody in America has equal opportunity, Big C.
Early, you know, it comes down to those who are in leadership in America. We can't put emphasis on athletes. They can solve the social problems.
Yeah.
Yes, they do make a nice living. We have people who make a better living than the athletes because they're...
Yeah. Because they're rich, and that's part of the process too, Big C. It still seems like we're having some technical difficulty with you, Big C, so we'll come back to you when we get the show started tomorrow. But I do want to tell everybody, land of the free, home of the brave. Take chances in life. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak your mind. Always keep that in mind. When you're going to be a leader, people are going to criticize you, and that's fine too. But it's okay. Just keep doing your thing. And I always want to say, let's keep our women safe. Always say no to domestic violence. If you see any woman being harmed or injured, just call 911 and keep our women safe. And I always want to tell you, as we do every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.